Hello there, welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series, and today I'm going to talk about erasing your mistakes with typewritten ink. So stay tuned. I've been in email correspondence with one of my viewers and blog readers, and I really appreciate this kind of dialogue. And one of the things that came up in a recent email was concerning the fact that I tend to favor using correction tape cartridges, such as these, for correcting mistakes with typewriters. And my correspondent was inquiring about those old hard rubber disc typewriter erasers with a little brush on the end, and whether I would favor using one of those instead. Well, that got me thinking. I've never really tested trying to erase typewriter ink, cloth ribbon ink, on paper using different kinds of erasers, and I thought it would be kind of fun today to try to do that and see what kind of results I get. So if you guys remember, if you've ever seen one of those legacy typewriter erasers, I don't have one on me right now. I don't believe they make them anymore, otherwise I would buy one to show you. But they're a round disc, a thin, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so thick. They're thin enough so you can erase an individual letter. And it was a very hard grade of rubber. And so I decided to go through my bin of pencils and stuff in my office and try to find some various hardnesses of erasers. So what I come up with is, here is kind of a white art gum kind of eraser. And this has been a pretty good eraser for pencil and stuff. Next is a Palomino Blackwing pencil, and this particular eraser in these Palominos, you can remove the little metal clip and you can extend out the eraser. They give you plenty of eraser on these Palominos. So I thought, well, that's an interesting kind of eraser. I'll try that. The third kind of eraser was one of these little, what I call an add-on or a push-on eraser that goes on the end of a pencil. And this one was a little bit hard and old, used. It's been sitting around a while, so I thought, well, that might be a good simulation of a typewriter eraser. And plus, it has a thin edge on it that might be good. And then lastly, I had this old Prismacolor red pencil, vermilion colored pencil with an eraser, and it's a really hard eraser. You know how these pencil erasers get old. So I thought, well, this is kind of a hard grade of rubber. It might simulate those typewriter erasers. So I'm going to use these 4 erasers, just a sampling, a non-scientific sampling of different kinds of erasers that I had laying around my office. Next, I'm going to have to figure out what kind of paper to use. Well, I suspected that the kind of paper that you're typing onto might have a lot to do with how well the ink is able to be erased. And one of the reasons I suspect this is because back in the legacy days of typewriters, there was such a product known as erasable bond paper. So I was thinking that I needed to use a variety of different kinds of papers available to me around the house here and see if I get various results. So let's take a look first of all at the different kinds of papers that I come up with. Well, first of all is this raggy kind of paper. It kind of reminds me of newsprint from my roll of teletype paper. And so that's the first kind of paper I'm going to be using. And then the next kind of paper we'll be using is some standard printer paper. This is not really inkjet, it's just like copy paper actually. So really designed for xerography. It's not super thick, just inexpensive, big box store kind of copy paper. The third kind of paper is one of my favorites for typing on. It's this AMPAD engineering grid paper, and it has a blank side on one side with some boxes up here, and then the other side is a 1/4 inch grid. And so I'm going to use that as one of our test sheets of paper. Then I'm going to use this Mead multi-purpose paper, and as you might remember from a previous video, this stuff is actually the Mead legacy typing paper that's been rebranded. So I'm going to use some of that. It's very thin and a nice typing paper. So then the last two kinds of paper are papers that I don't believe you can get anymore. I bought these at thrift stores. This first one is a Velvetone by Springfield. It's Velvetone erasable bond typewriter paper, and the price on this was $2.69. So I don't think it's that price anymore, even, and you can't even find it. So there's that paper. And then lastly in my collection was a different brand of erasable typing paper. This one is made by Packwell. It's called Erasable Bond 25% rag, and it comes in a little interesting little nifty box. You lift up one flap and you lift up the others and they just open up. And I got to thinking actually that I might be able to make a little typewriter paper holder out of cardboard using this as a template. So that might be another project we'll do. But anyways, I'm going to use that paper as well, the erasable Packwell typing paper. So let's see what we got. And for the purposes of our test today, we're going to be using my Fawcett 1620 typewriter that I've been enjoying so much since I recently acquired it. And this will be our test workhorse typewriter. Okay, let's start off with this teletype paper that's very raggy, kind of like newsprint. And we'll start with the white art eraser, which is this eraser right here. And so what I did is I typed 4 X's and I've tried to erase the last 2 X's, and I've used the erasers for 10 seconds. And you can see that I have a little bit of faintness on the last 2 letters, but it doesn't go anywhere close to erasing this ink. I'm thinking 10 seconds is a good test because how much time would you really want to spend on an individual erasing of an individual character, right? So the next test was the Blackwing Palomino, and actually it looks like it erased the last 2 letters okay, but with the caveat that you're actually tearing some of the paper out. I don't know if you can see that. We'll have to look at it later on, but it's actually tearing a little bit of hole in the paper. It's removing some of the fibers, but it did remove the letter. The third one is the add-on, what I call the add-on pencil eraser. And it also worked just about as well as the Palomino Blackwing. It left a little bit more smudginess and actually took off a little bit more of the fibers of the paper. Then the old hard pencil eraser on this pencil here actually removed even more of the fiber of the paper. So technically it did erase it, but it does wear a hole in the paper. Now I have a 5th test here, and what I decided to do was to take a standard correction tape cartridge and snip off a piece of the tape and see if I could just slip it in the typewriter and type over it like a Typex strip. And as it turns out, it doesn't work like a Typex strip. It does not transfer the white onto the paper the way Typex strips do. So that is a fail. And here is an example of the teletype paper, and when I was so-called erasing the ink, it's actually scuffing a hole through the paper. You can see those light spots is where the top surface of the paper has been scuffed off. So it's not really erasing as much as it is removing some of the fibers of the paper. So next we have the standard copy paper. So the white gum eraser hardly made any impact at all. The Palomino Blackwing eraser, the same. It just lightened up the ink a little bit. The stick-on pencil eraser, a little bit lighter, but the letter is still there. And the old hard pencil eraser, the letters are still there, they're just a little bit fainter. So definitely the kind of paper you're using has a lot to do with how well a typewriter ink can be erased. So our third paper under test here is this AMPAD engineering paper, and it's thinner than the standard copy paper, and it actually, the white gum eraser takes off a little bit more of the ink, but it's still, the letters are still there. The same way with the Palomino Blackwing. And the add-on pencil eraser didn't even do as well, nor did the old hard pencil eraser. So a lot of the erasing capability of these papers I'm seeing is really the ability of the eraser to tear off fibers of the paper. Now this is the Mead multi-purpose paper. This is my favorite typing paper that is still available today. So the white art gum eraser does take off some of the ink. You can tell the difference in darkness, but it does not really erase it. The Blackwing does slightly better, but the letters are still there. The add-on pencil eraser does a little bit better, but it's really taken off some of the fibers of the paper, and the old hard pencil eraser does an even better job, but again, it's just tearing off more of the paper fibers. So not a great erasing experience here. So this is the Packwell erasable typing paper in the red package, the 25% rag paper that is no longer available, but I thought it would be an interesting comparison. So the white art gum eraser doesn't do a very good job, neither does the Palomino Blackwing. The add-on pencil eraser more like smudges the ink. You can see it sort of makes a smear. The old hardened pencil eraser does a little bit better job, but the letters are still there. And then I did the test with a typing correction tape strip. It doesn't lift off any of the ink. And then finally, as a last ditch resort to try to see, I got some Scotch matte finish magic transparent tape, and I thought the idea was the adhesive on the tape might pull up some of the ink. It doesn't do anything to it at all. So it looks like even the old legacy typing paper that was supposedly erasable isn't really erasable with modern types of erasers, and whatever erasing it does do is probably part of it has to do with taking off the top surface of the fibers of the paper itself. Finally, we have the Springfield Velvetone erasable bond typing paper. This paper by far was the best paper to erase on. So this is the white art gum eraser, which, if you'll remember, was the least able to erase any of the ink off the other kinds of paper. Well, look at that. The two X's are almost completely gone. The Palomino Blackwing, the same thing. You can just see a little bit of a faint trace of the letters. The add-on pencil eraser really took off the ink, but it actually smeared it. There's more of a dark smear here. And then the old hardened pencil eraser wasn't too bad. It made a little bit of a smearing mark. So this paper by far is erasable much better than the others, but there's also a side artifact to this. You might notice these real faint imprints here. What this is my fingerprints are kind of transferring the ink off of the letters and transferring them onto the blank parts of the paper. You have to be careful of that with this kind of paper. Apparently, I'm guessing the surface of the paper is probably hydroscopic or something like that, hydrophobic, and the ink doesn't stick to the fibers as much, which is probably the secret to how erasable typing paper really is supposed to work. But this Springfield Velvetone definitely was the best of all of the kinds of paper I tested. So what did I learn from this little test? Well, several things. First of all, as far as what's available new on the market today, nothing erases cloth typewriter ink better than correction tape cartridges. They're simply better. But if you can find some of this stuff, this Velvetone erasable legacy typing paper, it really works well for erasing typewriter ink with standard erasers. And I would assume if you could find yourself a new old stock disc style typewriter eraser where the rubber wasn't all hardened up over years, it might work even better. But as far as the other types of erasing, there's really no other alternative to really erase cloth typewriter ink than covering it up with a film like this. Now, I thought about going to the office supply store and buying a cartridge of electric typewriter correction ribbon. But the problem with that is those correction tapes are designed to erase carbon film typewriter ink. And carbon film typewriter ink rests on the surface of the fibers, whereas cloth typewriter ribbon ink absorbs into the fibers. That's why a lot of these examples of erasing a typewriter ink, what you're really doing is kind of scuffing off the top surface of the fibers that have the ink absorbed into them. So I was also going to mention, even if you could find a really good eraser and paper combination that actually worked, the real problem is, do you really want to use an eraser on your typewriter and get all those eraser crumbs back into the machine? This Fawcett 1620 was just absolutely caked up with eraser crumbs. It was a combination of eraser crumbs congealed inside of old lubricant oils. And so you're just sort of making a maintenance job in the future for yourself. You're asking for the machine to have to get serviced if you're using an eraser. That's my personal opinion. So for now, until somebody comes up with a better technology, these correction tape cartridges are kind of what we have to get stuck with for erasing on cloth typewriter ribbons. And I would also mention that in the case of, I've been doing a lot of typing on the teletype paper. This correction tape doesn't work really well on the teletype paper. The film doesn't stick to the paper very well. And it really makes the cartridge seem like it's bad, but it's not the cartridge that's bad, it's the kind of paper. So even when you're using a correction cartridge, you have to make sure you're using it on the kind of paper that the correction tape will stick to well, which I think is something more like copy paper. Well, this has been another episode of the Typewriter video series. Until next time, you have yourself a great day.